Welcome to Patrick Henry's Red Hill and the Open Hearth Kitchen on our property. Today I'm cooking in our kitchen to show you how we do things when it was the 1790s. So the kitchen was always a separate building from the house because the kitchen caught fire about every 5 years. So you didn't want the fire risk in your home. Of course, it's very hot. And they didn't want the heat and the odors and the smoke in the home also. So at Patrick's kitchen, Patrick's cook, her name was Critty. Of course, she was an enslaved person here. And she was responsible for doing all the cooking on the place. So Mrs. Henry would meet with Critty every morning and they would go over the menu for the day. And Mrs. Henry would give Critty all the spices and sugar and teas and coffees that she would need for the day. The spices and those other items were very expensive, so they weren't just sitting out like we have them on our counter today. They were doled out and then put away for safekeeping. The family would have lived probably in the upstairs of the kitchen. Of course, we cook over the crane that's in the fireplace. I actually browned the chicken over the crane before I had it in this pan. This is an oven over here on this side. It's the warming oven. So you can see here with the chicken, I have embers on the bottom. The chicken is browned, and then I put embers on the top. So the chicken is baking in a Dutch oven. There's, of course, no electricity in 1790s, so everything was done by fire like this. It takes a long time to get the correct embers to cook on the fire. You have to have the wood cooked down for about 2 hours, and you have to always keep wood going because the embers burn out in about 15 minutes and you need to replace all of the embers. That's bacon that is cooking closer to the fire. It doesn't really need embers underneath of it if you get it close to the fire like that. That's called a spider pan because it has the legs like a spider. And these are called Dutch ovens. They have legs underneath of them also, and they sit down in the embers like that. So some of the utensils, the blacksmith would have made the utensils that you see here behind me, things that I cook with, spoon, fork. Of course, Critty did not go to Walmart and buy a rolling pin. This was handmade. Sugar came in a hard cone and you would break off pieces that you needed. Sugar was very expensive. It was used very, very seldom. Their cakes and cookies and pies did not have much sugar in them. They do not taste like ours. They're not at all what you would expect. Of course, a lot of the tools are things that we use today. I have one of these in my kitchen. This is a dough scraper and a juicer for citrus. But there's a lot of things that are missing in a kitchen from 1794, such as there's no refrigeration, there's no electric stoves, there's no electric lights, there's no running water. So I think that Critty any cook had a tough, tough job. She would have been the first one up in the morning to get the fire going. As I said, it takes several hours to get the embers where you need them to cook. She would have cooked breakfast first, and then they would have their largest meal about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They said 2 of the clock. So that would be the large meal, and that would was a good social hour for them. And then later in the evening, they would have had leftovers and kind of a cold supper. So Critty had quite the job. These crocks are made of clay. They would have been made here on the plantation. And if you put them in cool water, they take on the temperature of their surroundings. So they stay nice and cool. So you could keep things cool in the crock in the spring. If you want it warm, you can take this crock and set it in the sunshine. It'll take on the heat. And you could warm things in it. Say you want to just warm up some bread. It would be very easy to do that. Another thing is tea from China. It's in a hard block and it is compressed with the moisture pushed out of it. This was very, very expensive. So the most common tea was a loose leaf tea. This wasn't as common. The cellar, so we were talking about refrigeration. There was a cellar and it was cool and dark. under the house or under the kitchen, and that's where root vegetables were kept. So root vegetables would be stored in the cellar, and they would last throughout the winter. Of course, the potatoes get a little soft and that kind of thing, but they're all edible. They used a lot of vinegars, so you could make pickles with cucumbers that they grew. There'd also be things like sauerkraut. Anything that could be pickled in vinegar would have a good shelf life. And salted. Of course, the meats were smoked, salted, and then smoked. The pork was a favorite because it was so easy to smoke. Patrick had a fish trap where the Stanton River and the Falling River meet, and so he always had fish. You can also pickle fish, and you can also salt and smoke fish. So fish was always available here on the plantation. Fresh meat wasn't a problem living out here in the country. There's always turkey and deer, squirrels, rabbits. So the people in the cities, if they didn't have means to buy meat, they didn't have any. And if they had to buy meat that was a little rancid, they would use herbs to cover up the fact that the meat was bad. But here on the plantation, Patrick had plenty of fresh meat and fresh fish, and plenty of room to grow vegetables for everyone.